Hello and welcome to another edition of the Dhabas of Democracy, our election road trip from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. I'm Barkha Dutt, and you're with the Mojo Story. Every single day, we come to you from another part of the country. We bring you voices from the ground, we bring you newsmakers, we bring you incisive political analysis. Our journey began in Tamil Nadu, in Kanyakumari, at the southernmost tip of the Indian mainland, and has since traveled through peninsular India, making its way into the west, into the states of Maharashtra, Gujarat, and finally into central India in Madhya Pradesh. From Madhya Pradesh, we have moved into Delhi, where the chief minister has just come out on bail. That event is going to have its own repercussions on the ground. But as we move towards the north to Uttar Pradesh, there is a new controversy brewing. In election season, almost everything is a controversy. The government's Economic Advisory Council, the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, has a report on population numbers that has created a absolute storm. In fact, a leading think tank, the Population Foundation of India, has slammed this panel's report on religious demographics, saying that it's the way it's been reported in the media is misleading and inaccurate, and basically takes a selective look when it comes to data on Muslims. Poonam Mutreja, who leads the Population Foundation of India, is our newsmaker today. Let me welcome her to the program and also put into perspective what we're talking about here. As I mentioned, the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council placed a report just a couple of days ago. It's created a veritable storm. And before I get Poonam to talk about why she has disagreed with the reporting, let me take our audience through the key points. Welcome to the program, Poonam. This panel basically argued that the Hindu share of the population had dipped from 85% to 78%. It then went on to say that the Muslim share of the population had actually risen from 10% to 14%. And basically, in response to this, there's the details and the key points that the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council made. In response to this, Poonam, the Population Foundation of India had a very strong statement, and you said that this has been a kind of selective and distorted, misleading and inaccurate reporting. What bothers you the most of what you're hearing in the last few days?
What bothers me the most is whether it is the media or political figures demonizing Muslims and creating a fear psychosis by using that number, which is completely misleading. So, if you look at absolute numbers rather than proportional increases, we have to take the base number into account. If a population, for example, is 10, and it becomes 20, we don't shout that this 100% increase is a cause for worry. But what we have done is we've created in the middle of a situation where there are already so many myths and misconceptions about Muslim growth rates, which are absolutely myths, because Muslim population is declining in India. If you look at the last 3 decades, in fact, it's declining faster than the Hindu rate of decline or growth. And from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, if you look at Kashmir, there is the fertility rates are declining. So it doesn't matter, the religion doesn't matter. It is a situation of declining rates where we have to worry about a whole lot of things. But here we are only worried about an explosion of Muslims in the media, as well as the way the politicians are picking up that one number, and which is not surprising. Politicians have lost no time in shaking their heads in anger about the demographic shift and attributing it to anything that comes to their mind, from polygamy to illegal migration to conversions and minority issues. So it's brought all the demonizing and negative issues about one community, and no research should do that. So let me say, between 1951 and 2015, how the data should be seen. Shall I?
Before
Yeah.
you do that, and you have argued that in fact, when you look at the decadal population of Muslims, the fact is that it has been declining at a pace faster than the decline in the Hindu community. But I want you to zero in, and we have your statement coming up, on whether it is the finding of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council that you have a disagreement with, or the way it's been presented in the media. Is it the actual report or the media reporting on it? Because, for example, when when the report actually says that, look, the Hindu share, and it's important to get this terminology right. We are not talking about absolute numbers. We're talking about population as a percentage of the overall
Yeah.
population, right? So when the EAC report says that the Hindu share of the population has dipped from 85, roughly, we've rounded off the numbers, 85 to 78%, and the Muslim population, the share of Muslim population has risen from 10 to 14%. This data has actually been in the public domain. S.Y. Qureshi has a whole book on it. One of the
Yes.
points you make is that the numbers are not new, the data is not new. So, what is new about this report? Do you disagree with the report or the way it's been reported?
Well, I'd like to say, on the whole, I disagree with the reporting. But as far as the report is concerned, the interpretation is very curious. The interpretation is that Muslims' growth rate is higher, is increasing. Muslim growth rate is high because from 1951, because Muslims have been looked after well in India, and whatever the political ramifications or political insinuation and innuendos, I'm not going into. But that's not right. In fact, it is when there is women are educated, women, you invest in there and they have incomes, they are empowered, they have the agency to access family planning services. And in states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, where family planning and other health services and governance is better, women are doing better on their fertility in terms of the wanted fertility. And therefore, to say that the Muslim growth is high because they have been looked after, it doesn't make the data doesn't support that anywhere. And if they wanted to do, demographic changes is a very serious issue today, globally and in India, where we have a large young population and we have women who have fewer children, who aspire to work, will have more time to work. In a situation like this, you do an analysis which defies any database or logic, and that is what is also a lot of people are picking up, and it seems very political to me. And you don't make politics out of women's wombs and bodies and the data around them. At this point of time, we have so many serious issues to look at. Aging, we are going to be an aging society very fast. We have 370 million young people who need investments in education, jobs. We have women. There is the possibility of not just a demographic dividend, but a gender dividend. We also cannot have a disastrous situation where 20% of our society in 10 years is going to be aging society. We have to prepare for all that, and here we are distracted and wrongly interpreting the data.
Okay, now before we come to the politics of it, Poonam, let me actually ask you about the Muslim population. As I mentioned, the former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi wrote a whole book called Population Myth. And he spoke about how even when it comes to polygamy, polygamy is actually highest in tribal communities. And it is marginally, very marginally higher, he argued, in Hindu communities than it is in Muslim communities. That's one point. But when it comes to actual increase in population of the Muslim community, which is a very, very political conversation in our country in election season, what does the data tell you? I think the argument you're making is that the total fertility rates of all communities are actually showing a kind of healthy improvement, a healthy balancing. Point one. Point two, you have made the argument that actually uh, a kind of awareness around population control coincides with education and other socioeconomic indices and not with religion. So Muslims in the South, for example, where the development indices are better, will have a different TFR or a different growth curve than Muslims in the North, where the economic indices are not so good. So can you elaborate on this? And
Yeah,
can you also share whether there's been a change in the
yeah.
last sort of 10 years when it comes to the Muslim growth numbers? Because obviously, at a point, the population control was not as effective as it is now.
Yes, there has been a change since the last, it started changing 3 decades ago, but the last decade, no, we have not done a census for the last decade, but I can tell you that if you, when we get the numbers, and if we had the numbers for the last decade, then it, we would know that once population begins to decline in any society and community, and especially given the other social factors, it decreases rapidly. And that's what happened in the census, last census, which is 2011, and 2021, it'll be a very different story. So Muslim population, in fact, we find that the Hindu population decline is 0.9% in the last census, while Hindu population decline is by 1%. So you already
So,
see,
so,
and
so,
it
so,
was,
so, so Muslims are controlling their population at a
yes, at a
steeper
faster
rate.
rate.
But
Yeah.
then the argument would be that their growth initially was higher than the Hindu growth.
Yeah, but the base, you see, you're taking percentage. The base, let me look at the base. Muslim population increased by 14 crores, whereas Hindu population increased by 70 crores, which is 5 times. So this is the period 1951 to 2015. So that is the period where we have seen a larger increase. But again, it is the base. So don't take percentages, look at the numbers. And the share of the total population, Hindu share came down by 7%, while Muslim came down but went up by 4% points. And to interpret this as crores, you can create a lot of
But
misinterpretation.
it is accurate to say that
Yes,
Muslims were nearly 10% of the population in 1950,
yes.
and till
And now they're
2015
14%.
they're 14%. Qureshi Saab's book projects that by 2100 they will still only be 18% of India's population. So it is a canard to say
Maximum.
maximum.
Maximum, because you see what's happening is, as I said about decline, a recent report, modeling is what we are relying on. A recent report shows us, a global report shows us that India's fertility on the whole is going to decline faster than projected, which includes Hindus, Muslims, everybody.
Mhm.
So the decline may be faster than when Qureshi did his book. 18, we may not reach 18%, but we can't reach beyond that.
Right. So what is the biggest myth when it comes to Muslim population that you think has been compounded by this report?
So that the Hindu share down by 8%, Muslim share up by 43%. That is what is creating all it's fuel for fire. And the fire is being lit by both the media and political leaders. And such a contrast is only expected because the percent base of the Hindu population is much larger than that of the Muslim population. It is as simple as that.
The report also goes on to argue that despite all the noise that you hear about the place or the rights of Muslims in India, these numbers and this data shows that not just are religious minorities, I'm quoting from the report now, protected, they are indeed thriving, right? How do you respond to this?
You know, First of all, fertility rates are closely linked to education and income levels, not your religion. So that's why what you raised earlier in Kerala, the fertility rate of a Muslim woman is much lower than the fertility rate of a Hindu woman in Bihar, for instance. And
Mhm.
states with better access to education, healthcare, socio-economic indicate development, such as Kerala and Tamil Nadu, exhibit lower TFRs across religious groups. So it is better governance, whether it's health or other education and so on. And successful family planning programs in Muslim majority countries like Bangladesh Indonesia have resulted in lower birth rates compared to India. And why? These countries have achieved this through higher levels of female education, greater employment opportunities, and better access to contraceptive choices. This clearly shows that fertility decline is influenced by development factors rather than religious affiliation. And let me say, in India, we had very little focus and percentage expenditure on temporary methods. Sterilization is something which is um, uh, uh, the religion doesn't say so, but because the women don't have agency, they don't have so much access to or the agency to go and get permanent methods very early on, which is sterilization. Now the government in the last 10-15 years, and this government can take some credit for it, has introduced temporary methods which work well. And in the privacy, women can just go and get an injectable or have get an IUD inserted. So family planning services have increased tremendously in the last decade, thanks to the Lukur Supreme Court order to the government to have fixed day services, decreased camps. It's very difficult. It was very difficult for Muslim women to go and sit in these camps. Today, you can just go to a primary healthcare center and get even a
Okay.
sterilization.
Let me, in the end, take a couple of questions from our audience. Binu Philip says, has the Muslim community today embraced the idea of family planning, or are they limited to a few urban pockets? What do you find in your research?
No, across the country. As I said, Kashmir to Kanyakumari, there is a decline in fertility. And, one of the states where there's the highest decline in fertility and use of contraceptives is Kashmir, which has a very high Muslim population. Then you look at Kerala, and then you look at districts. If you look at data, NFHS data and districts in UP and Bihar, the government rolled out a very good program, which is in 146 most backward states, which included a very large percentage of Muslims. And we are working in many of those districts, not states, sorry, districts. Family planning access has brought down fertility rates.
One more
Across
question. That's good to hear. One more question from Saurav Vashisht. Has there been any research on what number of Muslims, if they are migrating out of India to work in area countries such as the Middle East, are growth rates also impacted by immigration figures? One, we don't have any data to show that Muslims are migrating out. There are
Yes, we
all
don't have the
communities
data.
migrating out. So I would like to say that in response. But growth rate and migration, do we have any research on that?
We have internal migration, we have research, we have the data, but we don't have religious-wise data on external migration out of the country. And it is time we start looking at that, because there is going to be a lot of migration of young people out of India, especially countries like Russia, which don't have working age population anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Countries like China, Japan, they'll all need Indians to go. So now who gets to go? We're not going to look at the religion of the person who goes. We'll have more trouble.
Finally, to those who might say on the and there's some comments like that you're being politically correct, you're being in denial. There has been an explosion at one point in history in the Muslim community, let's say, compared to the Christian community. The PMEAC report also shows a very marginal increase in the Christian community, for example, since 1950. What would you say to those who will say, Poonam Motreja, you're just being woke, you're being PC, you're being politically correct?
Yes. So I would say to them, focus on how we can help Muslims, because Muslim women want to decrease their fertility just like Hindu women. The average rate for wanted fertility is much is adverse. 10% unwanted fertility there is in India. So focus on educating them. By all means, I will not call it targeting. If Muslim women need family planning, education, and health, let's make the extra effort to provide them. And for those who are concerned about only Muslim population growth, I would say to you, your time is well spent if you invest and advocate for more resources, education, health, and family planning access to Muslim women.
Finally, there's been no census since 2011. For the last decade, we don't actually have updated data. How much does that hamper actual assessment of numbers?
How about that? What was it?
I'm saying, given that there's no new census, how does that impact sort of our understanding of numbers?
You know, one is that we can't give the real data for the last 15 years, literally, right now. Especially, it's now almost going to be 15 years. Now, in the absence of census data, Indian bureaucrats, Indian policymakers have found they've depended on census data to make policies, programs, and so on. It's going to impact us very badly. Plus, we are not going to have the data, even by the government, to say we have helped X number of people. We need the census data to know who has migrated, who has done what, who has taken advantage of different schemes. It is one of the most, I would say, regressive things for policy making, not having the census data. And I can bet you, Barkha, the census data is going to show a much higher Muslim decline in the last decade.
Okay, Poonam Motreja, we leave it there. The report and your response, Population Foundation of India's response, has generated a lot of debate, and that is as it should be. But census data, if available, would make this debate even more informed. Thank you very much, Ms. Motreja, and thank you for joining us and shedding light on this very complex subject. That brings us to the end of another edition of the Dhabas of a Democracy. Thank you for joining us, and do follow our journey as we travel by road from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. If you haven't signed up to be a Mojo member, the link is right there. Please do it right away. Thank you for watching. Take care. We're at the Indian mainland's southernmost tip in Kanyakumari, the confluence of the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean. It is from here that we're beginning our big road trip to the heart and the soul of India, Dhabas of Democracy. That's all about traveling thousands of kilometers to look at the food,